Hey, Bruchim Aboyim, welcome. So today we're going to be trying to answer a question. We're going to answer this question based on Zera Shimshon and on some of my own ideas, which is during these days leading up to Shavuot, what should a person be focusing on? What should we be working on improving? So the first place we're going to look is in our davening for the Shlosha Regalim, for the three festivals. And we all know that it says here, V'titein lanu Hashem Elokeinu b'yava moedim l'simcha chagim uzman l'sason es yoim. And then depending on which day it is, whether it's Passover, Shavuos, or Sukkot, you have a special insert. So if it's Pesach, you say Chag HaMatzos Zman Cheresenu, and if it's Shavuos, you say Chag HaShavuos Zman Matan Torasenu, and there's one for Sukkot, Shmini Atzeres. And then you conclude the same way, depending, no matter which one it is, and you say Mikre Kodesh Zecher Liyetzias Mitzrayim. So what do we see here? We see that all of these festivals that we just mentioned, Pesach, Shavuot, Sukkot, they are all a Zecher Liyetzias Mitzrayim, which means they are all a remembrance of the leaving of Egypt. That is what our prayer book says. So let's go in order of obviousness. So Passover obviously is a commemoration of the leaving of Egypt. We don't have to explain that. Sukkot to a lot of people is not as obvious, but it really should be just as obvious because the Torah says that Hashem took us out either in these booths or these clouds of glory when we were leaving Egypt. And when you look at the Sukkah booth, you're supposed to remember that he took us out in these booths or the clouds of glory when we left Egypt. So, according to the Torah, even though for people, for some reason, it's not as evident, but according to the Torah, it's just as evident a remembrance of the leaving of Egypt. Now, Shavuos, on the other hand, seems to be very detached from the other two in terms of how obvious of a remembrance of the leaving of Egypt it is. Now, one time I had a student say something that sounds very smart. And he said, well, how come Shavuos, which is the day we receive the Torah, is any less obvious than the other ones? The whole purpose of leaving Egypt was for Shavuos, is what he wanted to say, meaning Shavuos is the day of the giving of the Torah. So therefore, it should be just as obvious as the other two. To which I said, that's a smart answer, but it's actually not correct, because it's not true to the words that we say in our davening. You see, we know that in math, you have the left side of the equal sign, the 1 plus 1, and then the right side of the equal sign equals 2, right? So what you're saying is that Shavuos is on the right side of the equal sign, meaning the purpose of leaving Egypt, that whole process is on the left side of the equal sign, and the answer is the receiving of the Torah on the right side of the equal sign. But that is not what our Siddur says, and that is not what many rabbinical sources say. Look, our Siddur says that Shavuos is a Zecher Liyetzias Mitzrayim. It's a remembrance of the leaving of Egypt, okay? Meaning that it should be on the left side of the equal sign. This is the source the Zera Shimshon quotes. It's a pasuk that says, "V'haluchos ma'ase Elohim hema v'hamichtav michtav Elohim hu charus ala luchos." We have a literal translation underneath it. The tablets were the work of God, and the writing was the writing of God engraved upon the tablets. Now, the word for engraved over here is charus. Our rabbis learn, based on the fact that in the actual Sefer Torah there are no vowels, that the word charus shares the same consonants as the word cherus. And so, therefore, the verse can be read as if it says, Cherus al haluchos, meaning freedom came through the tablets, meaning through what is written on the tablets, a person attains freedom. Meaning that once again, the freedom, which is the right side of the equal sign, only comes through the tablets, which the tablets we know are what we received at Har Sinai. We know that, for example, in the Pesach Seder, there are four Lashonot of Geula. There's four different ways of expressing our freedom. The fourth of which is Lakachti, that I shall take you to be my nation, which we say is a reference to us receiving the Torah. Meaning that the receiving the Torah is considered part of the redemption process. It's not like the post-redemption process. It's not the purpose of the redemption, it's part of the redemption. There, we just brought multiple sources that prove that the giving of the Torah was part of the redemption process, not the purpose of the redemption process. So, what freedom was still necessary after our physical freedom from Egypt? That we would need another freedom through the giving of the Torah. because we were no longer afraid of Pharaoh. Pharaoh and his army drowned at the sea already before we even got the Torah. So what freedom was still necessary at the time that we needed the Torah to complete our freedom process? So the saying goes is that you can take the Jew out of Mitzrayim, out of Egypt, but can you take Mitzrayim out of the Jew? That's a much harder thing. Meaning that, yes, by the time that we had finished at the sea, we were completely free from the physical rule or sovereignty of Egypt upon us. That was gone. But we still had, spiritually and emotionally and mentally, some of Egypt still within us. That's why we needed another level of freedom, another step to freedom, which can only be through the giving of the Torah. Through the giving of the Torah, we get rid of the Egypt that's within us. And that's the mental and spiritual impact of Egypt, not just the physical one. A person might ask, how is that even relevant today? So you need to know that there's a very famous Balatanya that says that Mitzrayim is not only to be understood as the historical place of Egypt, it's supposed to be like anything that represents constraints in your life. So a person today at his Pesach Seder, yes, has to think about the actual exodus from the historical place of Egypt. That is true. But you also have to be thinking about your own personal Egypts, whether that's anxiety, depression, overindulgence, because Egypt, to a certain extent, is a metaphor. What do I mean by that? And what is the metaphor? So Egypt in Hebrew, we call it Mitzrayim. Yet, at the time that the Jews were in Mitzrayim, is the world's, like, in terms of landmass, it was an empire, right? It might have been the biggest empire at the time. Yet the word Mitzrayim, tsar, means like straits, something constricted, okay? So Egypt represents our viewpoint of the world. That which looks to be big on the map and mighty and strong, spiritually is actually just a very narrow place, a place that is not conducive to growth. And that's the reality. And in fact, Israel, the land of Israel, physically on a map, is the complete opposite, meaning it's like one of the smallest countries in the entire world. Okay? Yet our rabbis in benching in our Birkas HaMazon that we make after eating, they refer to it as a land of Tova or Chava, a great expansive land. Well, what do you mean, rabbis? How could it be that Egypt, which is the world's like largest country at that time, you refer to it as Mitzrayim, a narrow place, but Israel, which always has been a very small place, the rabbis call it the expansive place? It's because we don't go by looks. We don't go by our eyes. We don't go by physical reality because that's just sheker. That's lying. Spiritual reality is the truth. And in Israel, despite its small size, that is the place where a person has the largest spiritual potential. That's what makes Israel or Chava wide. And Egypt is the opposite. It's a place of narrowness. Okay? So what we have to get rid of is the things that look to be to us chashuv, but in reality are not chashuv. That is getting the Mitzrayim out of the Jew, and that is your purpose during these Yemei HaSphira. But to do that with your own Mitzrayim. I'm going to give you an example. I read this from Rabbi Victor Miller, Sefer Zadik LeBracha. He tells a story about how there was a man and his wife, and they went to their in-laws' house. And the woman's father would constantly berate her for wearing a sheitel, for covering her hair. Till one day, because she was like a balas tshuva, she, became Orthodox later in life. One day, her husband just couldn't take it anymore. So what did he do? Wow! Just punched his father-in-law straight in the face. And so you know what Rav Victor told him? Rav Victor told him is that you are an example of like needing to get the Mitzrayim out of the Jew. Because what is it? You grew up here in America. And in America, you watch the movie where the husband sticks up for his wife and he punches the guy in the face for saying something not nice about his wife. That's what you think. You think you're the superhero. Because you watch all these movies and these TV shows where now that guy is celebrated as a hero. that's not a Jewish way of doing things. We don't just punch our father-in-law in the face, no matter what he says, right? That's not a Jewish way of behavior. That's an animal type of behavior. But you live in a society that you have ingratiated yourself into, to that you think what you did is commendable. So what you do during this time, because we're building up to Kabbalah Torah, is we have to find the values that have seeped in from secular society and get rid of them and work on them. Somebody asked me, but didn't they just receive the Torah and all those things got fixed on their own? So why do I have to work during this time? So I'll tell you, this is based on a little bit of a controversial idea of the Vilna Gaon. The Vilna Gaon says that your midos, your character traits, and the things that you value are what hold your mitzvahs, are what hold your Torah. The Vilna Gaon writes in his Sefer Even Shlema that Torah is like water. If you pour it over flowers, flowers grow. And if you pour it over weeds, weeds grow. Okay? Now, there are many people that object to this idea. Okay? But it is a very interesting idea, and I didn't make it up. You can find it. It's in the Even Shlema from the Vilna Gaon. So the reason why we can't just go into Kabbalah Satorah passive is because we have to make ourselves vessels to receive the Torah so that we can use that Torah for good growth. Because you're right, we're going to get it anyways. But the Torah, we want it to magnify us in a positive way. Now we have a clearer idea of what we have to do in preparation for Shavuos. We have to work on ourselves and make ourselves into vessels that will accept the Torah. And not only will it accept the Torah, but it will accept the Torah in a way that will tend towards positivity, that will tend to make us into better people. And we do that through working on ourselves and getting rid of the Egyptian ideas, these foreign ideas from among us, so that we can increase and feed the good Jewish ideas that are inside of us.